Vanya had always been clumsy, a perpetual klutz. He and Marina had been neighbors since childhood, and from the very first grade, he faithfully carried her briefcase to and from school without uttering a word. Marina found amusement in his silence and teased him. "Vanya, why are you always so quiet?" He shrugged and asked, his voice tinged with a sniffle, "What is there for me to say?" Marina burst into laughter and replied playfully, "Well, it's probably best that you stay silent then." And so Vanya remained silent, except for the occasional louder sniffle whenever Marina grew older and caught the attention of boys. Vanya's mother, exasperated, would sigh and remark, "Why can't you find a nice girl, son? Marina is no good. She comes from a troubled background." But Vanya merely snorted and continued to accompany Marina. When she went to the club, he would wait for her on the street. When she was with a guy, he would discreetly follow. Marina had even raised her fist at him a few times. "Just leave me alone. I can't handle it anymore. You're scaring away my potential suitors," she would exclaim. Vanya never looked at her and calmly replied, "They're not good for you. You don't need them." Mockingly, Marina would retort, "And you think you're the perfect one? You're just a lump." Although Vanya felt offended, he chose not to show it. But then, fate intervened and he was drafted into the army. Life became tough for him, and he tried to occupy himself constantly to keep his mind off Marina. He spent all this free time at the gym, and upon his return, Vanya appeared as handsome as if he had stepped out of a magazine cover. Other girls took notice, throwing themselves at him, but his heart yearned only for Marina. And Marina was also content. She had a suspicion that she might be pregnant, nothing certain, but still a possibility. 2 weeks ago, during a risky period, she had neglected protection. That's when she needed Vanya the most. It took just a moment to seduce him, especially now that Vanya exuded confidence in masculinity. And then it happened again. A month later, Marina finally confessed to him that she was late, indicating the possibility of pregnancy. And as for Vanya, he felt elated. He could hardly believe the extent of his happiness. The mother, overcome with emotion, screamed and wept, uttering these words of caution. "It's not your child. Mark my words. It's not. Don't ruin your life. Don't marry her." But since his childhood, Ivan had been incredibly stubborn, so his mother eventually accepted the situation and began preparing for the wedding. Marinka gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, a tiny, precious little angel. Vanya cradled her gently in his arms, took care of her diapers, and tended to her needs. Marinka was exhausted, desperately in need of rest, and indeed, Marinka was truly exhausted. At night, when Vanya went to bed, she would ask their neighbor to look after Sonia, and she would venture out to bars and restaurants. In the mornings, she would return home and go straight to bed. She had no energy left to look after her daughter. Vanya was aware of it all but remained silent. He feared that if Marinka found out he knew, she would leave and take their daughter away from him, someone he didn't want to lose. Over time, Marinka seemed to calm down. She stopped her late-night outings, and Vanya began to relax, telling his mother that things were improving between them. However, his mother simply shook her head. Vanya's mother grew inexplicably attached to Sonia, even though she had her doubts. How could anyone not love such an angelic child? There were moments when she considered taking Sonia to her own place when Vanya was away at night, but that woman, Marinka, never left her granddaughter alone. The reasoning was simple. It's not the biological father who matters, but the one who raises the child. She made up her mind and found solace in loving Sonia. One day, after returning home from work, Vanya noticed Marinka sitting with a suitcase in front of her. His heart sank, and she looked at him, tears streaming down her face, as she uttered these words, "Forgive me, Vanechka. You know I never loved you, but now I do. I love you so much that it burns within me like a raging fire. I'm leaving you. I'm going to his place. He's waiting for me, but I'm going to bring Sonia along." Vanya gazed at her for a prolonged moment, deep in thought. Then, in a hushed tone, he spoke. I won't surrender, Sonia. There's no reason to subject the child to brothels. I can handle it myself. Marinka was taken aback, her eyes widening. What do you mean you won't give her away? Sonia is my daughter. I can't imagine life without her. Vanya's frustration surged, and he forcefully slammed his fist onto the table, causing one of its legs to snap. If you want to roam around, then leave, but I won't allow you to drag our daughter along. Though fear gripped Marinka, witnessing this uncharacteristic outburst from her husband, she gathered her courage to speak once more. Vanya's piercing gaze was enough to make her flee onto the street and into a waiting cab, without even a backward glance. Vanya remained seated for a while, lost in his thoughts. Eventually, he rose and made his way to his mother's place. As soon as he opened the door, Sonia rushed into his embrace. Daddy's here. Her mother instantly sensed that something was amiss. Where's Marinka? Sonika, go pack your toys in your backpack. We'll be heading home soon. The little girl scurried away, and Vanya turned his attention to his mother. She's gone. Where did she go? Why? Vanya, why do you make every word so difficult to extract from you? I don't know where she went, but I know she's with a suitor. My mother sank into a chair, just as she had been standing moments ago. How's it going with your boyfriend? And you seem so calm when talking about it. What about Sonia? I didn't break up with Sonia. You'll help me, won't you? Of course, I'll be there for you. But how could you do that? Well, she told me she never loved me, that she had a burning passion inside her. I wish she had told you where that fire was burning. Sonia entered the kitchen. Dad, are we leaving now? Yes, that's right. We're heading home, and tomorrow is Dad's day off. We can go to the park and ride the merry-go-round. Hooray! And what about Mom? Mom had to leave for a business trip, sweetheart. Sonia felt a little upset at first, but quickly found a silver lining. So Mom's share of ice cream is all mine, right? Vanya's mother, who had just wiped away her tears, burst into laughter. You're quite the clever one, Sonia. As they were about to leave, Vanya's mother touched his hand. Vanya, what are you going to do? Are you going to get a divorce? Yes, I've had enough of it. That's understandable. Kadyusha asked about you again. Mom, let's not bring up that old topic. Fine, I'll drop it. Vanya placed Sonia in the car, took the driver's seat, and pulled out of the yard. On the way, for some reason, he found himself thinking about Katya. Katya was the daughter of his mother's late friend. She had been left alone at the age of 18. The girl was small, like a gray mouse, often going unnoticed. Some people, whether out of insecurity or habit, tend to keep to themselves and remain silent. Katya was one of those people. Even as children, she never joined in the loud games, always observing from the sidelines. Now, Vanya struggled to recall her face. Of course, she couldn't compare to Marinka's beauty. Vanya and Sonia embarked on a shared living arrangement, with Vanya's mother, Alla Stepanovna, providing significant support. Recently retired, Alla Stepanovna found herself with an abundance of free time. Initially, Sonia inquired about her own mother, but eventually ceased doing so. Vanya gradually adapted to his solitude and began to find solace in it. He resigned from his job and established a small business of his own. Surprisingly, the business thrived from the outset. People recognized Ivan as an upright individual who always upheld his promises, eagerly availing themselves of his company's services. 2 years flew by, and one Sunday afternoon, Vanya and Sonia ventured out into the yard. Sonia settled herself on the swing, while Vanya engaged in a workout on the bars. It took him a moment to notice the woman holding a baby in her arms, gazing at him. As he comprehended the sight before him, he was rendered speechless. There stood Marinka, gaunt, oddly attired, clutching a young boy. Vanya, please forgive me. I can no longer wander aimlessly. Andriushka is hungry, and we've been wandering the streets for a month. I'm too ashamed to face you, she pleaded. Instantly, Sonia recognized who stood before her. However, she hesitated to embrace her mother, choosing instead to hold her father's hand while imploringly meeting his gaze. Though it was early in the morning, with no one else around, Vanya couldn't help but notice the neighbors peering at them from their windows. Some even went as far as opening their windows to catch snippets of the conversation. Let's head back to the apartment. There's no need to become a spectacle out here. We can talk there, Vanya suggested. Only after his words were spoken did Sonia rush into her mother's embrace. Marinka wept, showering Sonia with kisses and hugs. In the apartment, Vanya set forth his conditions. Feed the child, put him to bed, and then we'll talk, he instructed. Marinka prepared porridge and fed little Andrew, who was no more than 6 months old. Vanya observed in silence, taking in every detail. Once the child had fallen into a contented slumber, Sonia remained with him while Marinka returned to the kitchen. She sat on a chair across from Ivan. So, my husband left me. He promised me a life of prosperity, but instead, he began drinking, then resorted to violence. And after Andriushka was born, he vanished completely. A month ago, he resurfaced with his new wife, casting us out onto the streets. Vanechka, I know there's no forgiveness for what I've done. Please don't turn me away. I'll be your devoted companion, willing to do whatever you ask. I have nowhere else to go. My brother inherited our parents' apartment, and he would never allow me inside, Marinka explained, her voice filled with desperation. Vanya remained silent for an extended period. Eventually, he broke the silence with these words. You'll stay in a small room for now. After that, we'll see. Time passed, almost unnoticed, as Marinka settled into the conjugal bedroom. Life continued much as before, except that their family had expanded. Andriushka was growing up, affectionately calling Vanya Papa, while Sonechka began attending school. Ivan's mother had not visited them in a long time, resorting to insulting her son as a fool and Marinka as a whore. When Sonechka entered 2nd grade, Ivan discovered that his wife was once again being unfaithful. It hit him like a sudden jolt. He had noticed that her interest in their children faded over time, becoming only flustered when she had to deal with them. Vanya remained silent, merely observing. And then, on a few occasions when the kids were at kindergarten and school, he returned home to find Marinka absent, although she claimed to have been home all day. With clenched teeth, he decided to hire a private investigator. Within a week, he received numerous photographs of Marina with her lover. Vanya arrived at his yard, shrouded in darkness, finding no one around. He didn't want to go home. He simply didn't know what to do. Retrieving a bottle of whiskey from the trunk, he sat down in the gazebo and began to drink, his mind consumed by the twists and turns of his life. May I join you? A voice startled him. Startled, he turned around. A young woman stood before him, vaguely familiar. It was Katya, the one who had always harbored feelings for him. Please have a seat. What brings you out so late? He asked, still surprised. I couldn't sleep, and then I saw you through the window, so I came down. What are you drinking? Katya inquired. Don't ask, he replied. Marinka, you shouldn't do this to yourself. Getting drunk will only lead to regrets later, she cautioned. No, it won't. Why are you sad? Vanya questioned. They sat together with Katya in the gazebo until almost dawn. They reminisced, conversed about various matters. Vanya felt an immense sense of relief, as if the world around him had become clearer. He arrived home and quietly settled onto the living room couch, deliberately avoiding any interaction with Marinka or the sound of her breathing. Marinka had not left the house for a whole week. Vanya's absence during the nights had made her contemplate his whereabouts and actions. However, Vanya always claimed to be at work, avoiding any potential conflicts. Vanya couldn't get over his feelings for Katya. Despite her seemingly timid nature, There was an essence about her that Marinka lacked, a genuine sincerity and kindness that drew him towards her. A couple of weeks later, when Vanya returned home, Marika was nowhere to be found. Samichka realized the situation and immediately called her grandmother, who took Andriushka away from the garden. Vanya's face darkened like a storm cloud. He knew where Marika had gone, but he was unsure about what he should do. His mother had left, and as they went out to bid her farewell, they unexpectedly encountered Katya in the yard. She appeared flustered and blushed, and somehow, without fully understanding why, Vanya blurted out, "Katya, why don't you come with us to a cafe?" Katya looked bewildered for a moment, then gazed at him challengingly and replied, "Sure, let's go." The children jumped with joy, thrilled by the prospect. At the cafe, Ivan ordered almost everything from the menu, and they had a delightful time together. Vanya couldn't help but observe Katya closely, how she interacted with little Andriushka, teaching him to eat his cake without dropping crumbs, and how she patiently answered Sonia's questions. Overall, Katya appeared so warm and genuine. And most importantly, something Vanya had somehow overlooked before, Katya was undeniably beautiful. While Marinka's beauty was flamboyant and eye-catching, Katya's radiated a delicate internal charm. Whenever she looked at Vanya and smiled, he could see her inner blossoming. Could it be that she still harbored feelings for him? It couldn't be true, but she wasn't married either. "Katya, forgive me for prying, but do you have a husband?" Vanya asked, feeling like a complete fool. "I don't have a husband, nor have I ever had one," Katya responded, slightly embarrassed. Sonia nudged Vanya's side with her hand, scolding him. "Dad, you can't ask a woman such personal questions." Vanya realized his blunder and wanted to apologize, but before he could utter a word, Katya replied, "Why do you ask? You already know the answer yourself." Now it was Ivan's turn to feel embarrassed. He hadn't anticipated such honesty from the girl. The evening came to an abrupt end, and upon returning home, Marinka was already busy in the kitchen. She looked at Ivan with guilt, expecting a confrontation, but he remained silent. He silently retreated to the room and quietly lay down on the sofa. For 3 days, Marinka maintained a silent demeanor, as calm as a still pond. However, on the 4th day, she started to fidget. Ivan was at home that day, which meant she couldn't leave during the day. He observed everything, comprehended it all, and watched with curiosity to see what would happen next. No tremor stirred in his heart. It had somehow extinguished, as though it had never existed. When he gazed at the photos of Marinka and her lover, it was as if his eyes were opened. He had always known, deep down, that this would happen. He knew that Sonyeka probably wasn't his daughter either, but it didn't matter anymore. Both Sonyeka and Andriushka were his children, and he would never give them up to anyone else. Increasingly, Ivan found his thoughts drifting to Katya. He wondered what would have happened if he had paid attention to her back then, how their lives would have unfolded. Perhaps they would have had numerous children. He observed how Katya delighted in caring for the little ones, and he loved them too. Sonia came to him, sat down beside him on the couch, and embraced him. "Daddy, Mommy is so mean. She shouts at us." Ivan smiled. Of course, she's upset. She wants to be with her lover, but she can't escape. "Sameka, don't mind her. It was so nice when you and I lived together. It's the same now with Andriushka, but she shouts at him too." Ivan looked closely at his daughter. How hadn't he considered this idea before? Andriushka cried again, and Ivan heard Marinka yelling at him once more. He went into the kitchen, picked up the boy, cradled him in his arms, and tucked him in, narrating a story. Then he ventured into the kitchen. Marinka hadn't noticed him yet. He paused and observed that she had placed some pills in her tea. His eyebrow raised in surprise. He took a step back, pretending that he had just arrived. Marinka acted as if she were pleased. "Oh, Vanechka, and I was about to follow you." Here, let's have some tea. My head has been hurting today. Maybe the tea will help. She extended the cup to him, containing the tea with the added pills. Did she truly intend to poison him? No, she wouldn't go that far. Then what was it? Most likely sleeping pills. The moment Marinka turned her back to attend to the stove, Ivan discreetly poured the tea into a potted plant. Apologies, dear plant. You must be thirsty. Marinka glanced at his mug, perplexed. I was very thirsty. Well, I'm off to bed. I'm feeling sleepy. Marina accompanied him with a contented expression on her face. Vanya lay in the darkness, listening intently to the sounds emanating from the kitchen. He heard Marina's phone ring, followed by a hushed and hurried conversation before she entered the room. Vanya, Vanya, she called out, but he remained silent, feigning sleep. Marina left the room, and after a minute, he heard the front door close softly. Vanya rose from his bed and approached the window, watching as Marinka climbed into a taxi. That was it. Now he had to act quickly and carry out his plan. With utmost care not to disturb the children, Vanya gathered Marina's belongings. He placed 2 suitcases and a bag in the hallway, positioning her passport on top. Inside the passport, he inserted the photos the detective had provided him. Satisfied with his preparations, he returned to bed and surprisingly fell asleep swiftly. The doorbell abruptly woke him up. Hastily getting out of bed, Vanya opened the door to find Marina standing there, her eyes filled with fear. Vanya, I can explain everything truly. I love you so much. It was a mistake, just a mistake, she pleaded. Don't call, you'll wake the children. And please, don't cross my path again, Vanya replied firmly, closing the door. Marina stared at the closed door, her eyes hollow with terror. Where would she go now? What could she do? She knew that Ivan's apparent calmness and slowness were only temporary. She decided to give him time to calm down, to miss her, and then attempt reconciliation. She dialed her lover's number, desperation evident in her voice. Hello, my husband kicked me out. I'll come to you. Are you insane? Why are you here? My wife is returning in 2 days. Solve your own problems, her lover responded. The phone emitted a series of short ringing tones. Marina couldn't comprehend what had just happened. He had sworn that he loved her deeply, that he only wanted to be with her. After enduring 3 months of unbearable existence in a rented room, Marina decided enough was enough. It was time to turn the tables on Vanya, to make him miss her and forgive her. Her brother, however, would never allow her inside. Since their youth, he had held a grudge against her for persuading their grandmother to sign the apartment over to her, which she had later sold and squandered. He warned her not to come, not to hope for anything. Marina had to borrow money from her friends to rent the place. The thought of finding a job never crossed her mind. Vanya had never asked her to work. He had always provided for the family himself. But now, money was scarce, and it was time to return to the cozy family nest. Approaching the house, Marina noticed that Vanya's car was absent. Perhaps it was for the best. She would prepare something delicious, tidy up the place that was probably covered in dust, and in the evening, she would meet Vanya, seeking his forgiveness. However, when she attempted to open the door, her key didn't fit. This was a new development. Could it be that Vanya had thought of changing the locks? Marina seethed with anger. Well, no matter. Once they reconciled, she would make sure to give him a hard time for this lock. She began ringing and knocking on the door, but no one answered. Eventually, the neighbor's door creaked open. Marinka, what are you doing here? Marina asked, her voice filled with surprise and disbelief. Marinka looked at Marina and replied, Do you know where Vanka is? Marina, feeling a surge of anger, responded, I know, he went to the sea to rest. The sea? Marinka choked, her anger evident. Marina had thought he was concerned about their situation, but he was leisurely enjoying himself by the sea. And the kids? Marinka inquired further. The kids are with him. And his new wife, too, Marina replied, her voice tinged with bitterness. Marinka slammed the door shut without waiting for Marina's questions. Marina noticed the twisted expression on her face. She had never cared for Marinka, always feeling sympathy for Venka instead. Marina stood there, unable to move. What new wife? Had he lost his mind? Well, she would make him regret it. She would give him a hard time and return. And then, a brilliant idea struck Marina. She decided to report him to the police for kidnapping her children. They were officially divorced, so he had no right to take them without her consent. First, she needed to talk to Venka's mother. She would call him and threaten to file a statement if he didn't come back and ask for forgiveness. Marina made her way to Venka's mother's house. When the door opened, she faced a skeptical gaze. "What do you want?" Venka's mother asked curtly. "I want to talk to you," Marina replied. "There's nothing to talk about," Venka's mother retorted dismissively. "I'm going to report Venka and call the police because he took the children without my knowledge," Marina declared firmly. Venka's mother smirked and said, "Well, go ahead and call them. I'm interested to see how that plays out." Marina grabbed the phone, tears streaming down her face, and began sobbing into the receiver, explaining that her husband had taken their children without her consent, with his mother covering up for him. Venka's mother observed her with interest and then uttered, "Well, come in. Why wait for the police to show up at our doorstep?" Marina was oblivious to her own calm demeanor as she sat down. The police arrived shortly thereafter. As they began recording her testimony, Marina forced herself to cry, resorting to painful pinches to induce tears. After her statement, their attention turned to Ivan's mother. "Why are you aiding and hiding the children?" they questioned. "From whom? From her?" Ivan's mother retorted, "No one is hiding them. Venya, my son, his wife, and their children went on vacation. And this woman, his ex-wife, had her parental rights revoked 2 weeks ago." She handed over her documents, which the police thoroughly examined. Marina, with a crazed gaze, observed the unfolding scene. "Why are you behaving like this?" one officer asked her. "You abandoned your children, and now you're causing a scene." Marina began, interrupted by another officer. "How did you end up losing?" "We sent you multiple letters after you moved out of the apartment to the address you used to live at. You never responded. There are testimonies from neighbors and even private investigators," the officer explained. "I won't accept this. They orchestrated this entire situation. They'll beg and plead for my forgiveness. How am I supposed to live now?" Marina exclaimed. Ivan's mother glanced at her and remarked, "It's your own fault, you fool. People work to support themselves. Don't you understand that? Venya means everything to you." The police escorted Marina out of the apartment, warning her that next time they would take her to the station. She wrenched her hand away and walked off, contemplating her next move. She needed a plan to reclaim Ivan. On her way, she stopped by a pawn shop and exchanged the earrings Venya had once given her for some cash. It would be enough to cover accommodation and food. It would suffice. She would wait. Marina visited Venya's house every day, patiently waiting in the yard. Finally, after 3 hours of anticipation, she saw his car enter the premises. Adjusting her hair, she stood up to greet him. Venya was the first to step out of the car, assisting Katerina. Marina recognized the girl from their neighborhood. How she had changed, unrecognizable. She was blossoming. Then the children emerged. Sonia immediately noticed Marina, who smiled warmly. The girl hesitated and retreated behind her father, tugging at his sleeve. "Dad, look," Sonia whispered. Venya turned around, his eyes narrowing with anger. He approached Marina, firmly grasping her arm and leading her behind a bush, away from Andrew's view. Katia, sensing the tension, hurriedly instructed Sonia to escort her brother home before following her husband. Venya seethed with rage. Losing his temper was a rarity for him, but this was an exception. "I warned you not to appear before me," he exclaimed angrily. "I'm here for the children," she insisted. You never cared about those kids. Now, with your tail between your legs, you suddenly remember them." His grip on her hand tightened with each word. Just then, Kejia approached them in a hurry. "Vaneka, let it go. Let's leave," she pleaded. At that moment, Marinka snapped. She grabbed Vanya's arm and charged towards Kejia, pulling her hair and scratching her. Vanya managed to separate Marinka from his wife and pushed her aside. Meanwhile, the children arrived, running towards them. They embraced Katya and all started shouting, "Does it hurt? Does it hurt? Let me blow a fart." Katya tried to calm them down, sitting on the ground. "No, my darlings, it's all right. It's just a scratch." Blood was streaming down Kejya's cheek. Marinka watched the scene with pure hatred and then spoke. "Sonivka, Andrei, come here. I'm your mother. I miss you." However, the children didn't budge, nor did they even glance at her. Determined, Marinka raised her voice. "I said, quickly move away from this woman and come to your real mother. Do you hear me?" Sanja turned towards her and replied firmly, "Go away. Don't touch our Kejia. Go away." "What are you saying to your own mother? You little brat. You didn't get enough from me. Andriishka, go to your mother. He's not even your father." Vanya reached his breaking point. He turned to Marinka and warned, "You have 2 minutes. If you're still here after that, I promise you'll face severe consequences." Marina recoiled from his intense gaze, then hesitated for a moment before taking a step closer and issuing a spiteful hiss. "You will regret this." Later that evening, the entire family gathered in the kitchen, including Grandma, who hadn't seen them in a long time. The grandchildren excitedly presented her with seashells they had collected from the beach and small trinkets they had bought from street vendors. They purposely avoided discussing the events of the day. Sonia and Andrew eagerly recounted to Granny how captivating the sea had been, describing the crashing waves and the radiant sunshine. She listened attentively, a smile gracing her face. As darkness fell, it was time to head home. Suddenly, a commotion erupted outside, followed by a bright light. Everyone hurriedly rushed to the window, only to witness Ivan's car engulfed in flames. Those neighbors fortunate enough to have cars swiftly drove them away, but unfortunately, the nearby vehicles were also consumed by the fire. Katia shouted urgently, "Why are we just standing here?" "I don't know what to do. There's nothing to salvage," replied someone. "Is it her doing?" Katia pondered aloud. "I believe so. I have insurance, so I might be fine. But the neighbors, we installed a camera in the entrance a month ago, and it captures the area where the cars are parked." Marina reveled in her mischievous triumph. She had splurged on a bottle of champagne, using up her last bit of money. Sitting on the sofa, she opened the bottle and took swigs straight from it, a wide smile adorning her face. This was only the beginning. She would devise further schemes. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Curious as to who it could be, she opened the door and was met with the sight of policemen. "What do you want?" she demanded. "Step aside. We're here for you," one of the officers replied sternly. "Me? Follow me then. What is this about?" "Well, in case you weren't aware, it is illegal to set cars on fire." "I didn't burn anything. The car burned itself." Marina grew increasingly distraught. No, this couldn't be happening. She couldn't end up in jail, but why? She had been deceived, evicted from her own home. However, her pleas fell on deaf ears. When she attempted to shove one of the policemen and clawed at the other's face, she was swiftly handcuffed. They informed her that her sentence would now be significantly lengthened. A year later, Katya and Ivan welcomed their newborn daughter into the world. Sonia carefully observed a little bundle when she was brought back from the maternity ward, then gently placed her down. "Now, you're not the youngest anymore, which means you can't be spoiled," Sonia playfully remarked to her younger brother. "Here she is, little and vulnerable, and it's your duty to protect her and play with her." Andrew contemplated this for a moment. He had wanted to be spoiled himself, but being a responsible older brother seemed just as important. With a determined expression, he responded, "All right, I'll protect her." Laughter filled the room as everyone appreciated Andrew's commitment to his newfound role as the protective older sibling.